Alright, so by now, you know what 11.2 is, you know that Season 3 is looking good, but of course, World of Warcraft should be and is more than just seasons and new instances. This patch has now been up in the PTR for a while, and that means we can answer that burning question: are Blizzard still pumping out more of the same, or will this actually feel fresh and feel worth your time? And as always, the answer is both a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. So instead, I'm going to run you through the entire patch, then you can get an idea for yourself. But there's actually something more important, because I have got an absolute unit for you. So how many charging bricks are fighting for space under your desk? Kind of counted mine. It's a rat's nest, it's not fun, and that is where today's sponsor comes in. UGREEN's new Nexode 500 watt charger is mad. Look at it. Yes, 500 watts. You're not used to hearing that because this is the world's first 500 watt gallium nitride desktop charger. You got 6 ports, 5 USB-C, 1A in a single unit, so it'll handle all of your devices, like say, I don't know, 5 laptops simultaneously, or it just being your charging station, as an example, my professional cameras, all that stuff. But what really matters is just how good the simultaneous performance is, because even under full load, each USB-C maintains at least 60 watts, with the main port delivering up to 240. So that's say a MacBook Pro 16 charged to 60% in 30 minutes, and what's running all of this is 6 upgraded gallium nitride Infinity chips running at 95% efficiency, which keeps everything nice and stable and compact. It smartly distributes its power so that all of the ports work as you would expect. There are sensors to monitor temperature 100 times a second so that it's safe. That plus the vertical design means that this has got the heat dissipation that it needs to basically back up it being so goddamn powerful. So this is it. The UGREEN Nexode 500 watt charger is available on Amazon and the UGREEN website. It can be found, funnily enough, under my desk. The links are down in the description. There are lunch discounts as well, so definitely take advantage of those while you can. And if 500 watts is overkill, you can check out their 100 watt Nexode charger, which is an absolute price to performance king. One thing's been curious over the last few months, and that's that we've had fewer class changes than we were used to, which basically made me think that Midnight was going to hit us like a tsunami. But actually no, not just Midnight. We have really good news today, because if you're one of the few lucky specs, you are getting some huge upgrades, like, for an example, Frost Death Knight's experimental rework. So here's the big news. Breath of Sindragosa has now become the first non-evoker ability to be empowered. And honestly, I think they've kind of cooked. So here's how it works. Level 1 gives you burst damage for 8 seconds, and then it will be back up in 45 seconds. So basically it's perfect for your Pillar of Frost windows. Level 2 runs longer, but has got a moderate cooldown. And then level 3 is your big commitment, where it'll be up for 30 seconds, meaning it'll feel a little bit more like the classic Breath experience. And for gameplay, what this actually means is real flexibility. Like, if you just need some burst every 45 seconds for ads, use level 1. If you want sustained damage for a boss, go use level 3. So with this, you've got one ability, but you've got multiple uses. And that actually means that, to me, it does feel like a compelling use case for the Empower system. So that's pretty cool. And speaking of empowers, we also have got something new with Empower Rune Weapon, which has been completely reworked. So it's no longer a big haste cooldown anymore. Now what it's going to be is a quick cast damage button that generates resources. Essentially think of it as an on-demand runic power and killing machine proc generator, so big old burst of speed. And then there's another huge improvement, and that's that AoE finally works properly. So do you remember the old days where you had Glacial Advance baseline? That is essentially now back. Frost Scythe is guaranteed in your talent tree, and here's the key, it again will work like an AoE Obliterate. So no more Death and Decay weirdness, just Frost Scything for all of your cleave, which should feel pretty good. And even better, you can now talent Pillars of Frost to auto-cast Remorseless Window, which just gives you one less button to worry about. And if you're tired of tab targeting around your Frost Strikes, well, Blizzard have also went and solved that, because there's a new capstone talent. This one transforms Frost Strike procs into Frostbane, and Frostbane is an ability that automatically cleaves and detonates your Shattering Blade stacks. That's actually not it for the changes, because Blizzard are also pushing a Howling Blast playstyle as a real option, so basically not just Obliterate spam, and the tree now supports both of those approaches pretty well. So all in, right? It honestly looks and feels pretty great. We'll have to see how it shakes out with real numbers, but clearly this is Blizzard's testing ground for some new ideas, right? Things like flexible cooldowns, more engaging resource management, and I've got to imagine that if it works here, we'll probably see it elsewhere. Now, as much as all of that does sound cool, and I think in principle is great, to be truthful, opinion is mixed in some of these things, like say relying on Frost Scythe and removing Death and Decay. Some people just don't like that, which I do understand. So your mileage may vary. I'll certainly say that if nothing else, it's worth a try. Okay, now let's shift to Unholy because they've gotten similar changes. Fewer, but similar. And the focus is cleaning up their AoE and simplifying their opener. So here's the real big change. Remember how you guys were juggling like 5 different cooldowns? Now you've got 3. Apocalypse replaces Dark Transformation, so that's 1 button instead of 2. Abomination Limb is gone, it's now replaced by Legion of Claws. It's essentially same button, new effect, where you'll get a massive burst of damage and instant wound stacks, but no more gripping enemies around. And overall, right, here's the new, I guess, landscape of your cooldowns. Think of it like you've got 3 slots. So cooldown slot 1, that's Dark Transformation or Apocalypse. Cooldown slot 2 is either Army, or Abomination, or Legion of Claws, and then cooldown slot 3 is Unholy Assault. Basically, it stays the same, and you'll have 3 buttons maximum for your CTs, which overall should feel a good bit cleaner. But you're also getting something new in the form of Desecrate, so you can pick it instead of Defile, and what it does is kind of neat. Basically, you place your Death and Decay, and then with this, you can blow it up for fairly massive damage, and you'll still get the ground effect benefit stuff as well. So, looks kind of neat. Again, we'll just have to wait and see how it all shakes out. Okay, let's move over to Shadow Priest because you guys have got another mini rework, and Blizzard are finally solving one of Shadow's biggest problems, which basically is the rotational chaos. Which, you know, as far as problems go, really is a large one. Okay, so Shadow Crash has now got 2 charges and a 15-second cooldown. There is a trade-off, and that is that it only hits 6 targets now. But there is a real win in here, and that is no more random Shadow or Death procs cluttering up your screen and your priorities. Instead, you just get a buff that makes your execute phases more powerful. So, cleaner bars, hopefully cleaner decisions, and the final talent row has also been reworked as well. Essentially, it is the same effect, but Blizzard fixed the resource problems and the balance issues that were plaguing Shadow. But there is a controversial part. Come on, it's WoW class changes, there has to be. And that is that Mind Spike is gone. It's completely removed. So fully, this spec is now committing to Mind Flay as its filler ability. So whether you loved or hated Mind Spike, that's it. It's done. At least assuming this makes it live. Now for something new, you do get Void Volley. This is an AoE follow-up to Void Torrent, so you cast Torrent and then Volley for some extra cleave damage. Then next, a quick note about Hunters. So BM and MM are overall getting a similar treatment. There's just lots of under-the-hood maths changes, but the real cool thing is the quality of life, especially that's coming from marksmanship, and I really love this one. So your precise shots now cast at half a global cooldown. So you know the way it would basically feel like molasses? It would feel like a bit of a car crash just trying to get your spells off? Well, the half GCD is technically a small change, but it's one that makes the rotation flow far better. Now, that's not everything. It is the most exciting stuff, though, and we're going to do a full deep dive on all of the class changes later, whenever more of them make it to PTR and Blizzard get a few design iterations in. Because, basically, looking at all this stuff, I think they're trying to tell us something with the direction that they're moving in. I want to see that play out, and then we'll fully evaluate it. But for now, let's move on with the rest of the patch, starting with the story. But don't worry, not spoilers. This is less about the story itself and more the overall story experience, and if it's something that you might like. But basically, I want to say this. This is one of the most enjoyable main story quests we've had in a while. Quite a while, actually. And it's not because of anything massive and mind-blowing, right? And it's not even because the story is, like, absurdly crazy good. I think it's because Blizzard seems to finally get something, or at least be able to get that through into the game. And it's pretty simple. Characters need to have personalities, right? They need to feel different. And Blizzard have actually delivered that. Basically, you know the way one of the big problems you can get in writing is characters that really sound similar, like they might have different motivations, but it just feels like it's all plowing through the plot. Characters kind of sound the same, like in terms of the voice they're written in, all of that stuff. But this actually is way, way better. And it's not in the form of just big hype moments that are super cinematic that people get wowed by. Because as much as that is good, sometimes it can kind of, you know, confuse you with fancy things. Here, what's good is just, we get tons of little moments, right? Just struggling across Koresh, we just get a perfect amount of tension between the various people we ally with. And instead of the usual self-seriousness or overwhelming sweetness, you know the way they kind of feel like that with their writing? Here, it just feels kind of real, right? Every voice line is sharp, bitter, snarky. They're actually committing to a tone. It kind of works. And compared to the dry dragons of Dragonflight, my god, it's a massively better change. And even compared to, say, the goblins of Undermine sometimes being a little bit too goblin-y, a bit too goofy, this is just a way better balance. This feels like a sort of Warcraft that I could really find myself being more invested in. So basically, in that front, it's kind of a billion times better. There's something else Blizzard have committed to. Koresh is a new kind of zone. So the walkable bits are pretty small. And it's huge essentially because of volume, right? You're flying around these gorgeous, like, void-scarred sort of skyboxes, going to all of these different little craggy rocks and islands and things. And it really works. It basically is like Outland's Netherstorm kind of meets Argus from patch 7.3. But with an obvious difference. Because remember, in Argus, Blizzard did not let us fly. They wanted us to deal with their level design, which in the Antoran Wastes, not all of us loved. This time though, they've basically found a way to have their cake and eat it. Here's how it works. Normally you can fly freely, but then when you're phase diving, which is essentially you traversing what they call untethered space, well then you are stuck in the ground. And that's because Koresh is basically two zones in one. There's the normal zone where you're flying at full speed from point A to point B, like an absolute ADHD'd out MMO gamer trying to tick every single box, getting completely lost, right? That's basically how I play the game. So there's that. But then whenever you're phase diving, well, the level design actually matters. So in phase diving, you've got to climb about the place manually. You've got to run around, holes, deal with terrain, essentially everything you do when you're grounded, but Blizzard have basically been able to commit to that design a little bit more, essentially to give explorers something more to sink their teeth into, and as a reward for all of that, it's got chunky quests which are called warrants, so you'll be doing those. But other than that, what it does is it changes all the mobs, all the treasures, and all of the rares in the zone. I suppose it's almost like the storm phase of the Siren Isle, but way more thematic, and of course in a full patch zone, not just one very small island. It's also got its own upgrade currency that you can earn, and that will give you new exploring powers, which you use with your cloak. Which is honestly all pretty neat. So essentially it's a fairly new type of zone design where they're actually making use of the fact that we can fly and that you're sort of in space. However, there's an alec in the room. If you're tired of farming rares and treasures and secrets, achievements, mounts, renowns, all that stuff, what's this going to be like for you? Well, that's where I'd say we haven't really noticed anything special about Koresh, in that it is still like solo WoW world content. It's not like that's just magically changed, just that now there's phase diving and the progression that comes with it along with your cloak. And that stuff does actually all work pretty damn well. It does feel a lot better. But if you really need it to be a transformational experience, well, no, it still is WoW world content. But there is something I think everyone will appreciate, and that's Tazavesh. Tazavesh is our hub, and yes, that's the very same Tazavesh that is a mega dungeon. So it's going to be here as a full player city. And being a new city in WoW, it's got quests, secrets, and insane amounts of utility. As an example, it's got a portal network to delves that are all around Khazalgar, which basically means someone at Blizzard has really realized that the travel time can kind of suck. And certainly, if you wanted to earn loads of gold by cranking out some of your weeklies, just plowing through some delves, well, that portal network will be pretty damn cool. At least as far as I'm concerned, it's a really, really nice city to hang out in. Let's talk about the event. It's a modern WoW patch, so you basically knew it was going to have one. And this time it's called Ecological Succession. It's a new weekly world event. And the good news is, it's a breath of fresh air. The reason why is that this one is simple. I think Blizzard have figured out that we're kind of bored having similar feeling events every patch. So this time, the weekly box just comes from something that's fairly easy. I mean, in a way, it's barely even an event. You just show up once a week to the Oasis to go and help out. You then do one of two things. Either repel some Devourers who are attacking the perimeter, or just do some repeatable weekly quests. And essentially here Blizzard have found a way to kind of make you feel smart, where as you're doing this, you'll also be double dipping on those weeklies for some extra rewards. Basically, they know quest stacking feels fun, and they've worked that into how this event works. And I'll certainly say it's a welcome change from having to do all of the different gimmicky Undermine events. Not that they were particularly contemptible, variety is good, but I think Blizzard are learning when to basically give us a break and focus on just playability and getting you in flow with not a crazy amount of disruptions and just indexing in the core MMO things that feel good, like quest stacking. So, over time, through this, we're going to be bringing more flora and fauna to the Oasis, and that means that it won't just be the same quests after, every single week. And basically, in terms of feel, it's a little bit like a zoo that we sort of build ourselves over the weeks. Just kind of nice. And if you're a fan of the more dragonflighty, light-hearted, sort of pun-heavy side quests, well, you'll love this event, actually. So, for what it is, I think they've actually done a pretty good job. But I did mention side quests, and I certainly need to talk about the batch that we're getting in this patch. Well, if you ever wanted to get to know Brokers, Ethereals, and Void Elves better, this is basically your patch. You're going to be very happy, and as one of those people, I am pretty happy. Basically, WoW these days has got stacks of well-written and memorable side quests. I think that really started in patch 9.2, to the point where it's something we've just sort of came to expect. But I'd say they're only getting better, and in Koresh, well, we just find a zone that's absolutely jammed with them. So if you like the narrative stuff, if you actually just like sinking your teeth into the overall vibe of Warcraft, learning about the lore and that kind of thing, then you will have hours of game to play even after the campaign is done. I'm not going to spoil all of them though, so let's just move on to the next thing, which is the Cloak. Right, this may sound a bit silly to you because you've not really got a chance to play it, but certainly I'll say, having played with it, it feels really good to have an artifact cloak again, because this one's actually pretty nice. Now, also, there's some nice usability things. It does mean you've got a slot locked off for the patch you can be happy with. The cloak has got a bunch of buffs attached to it based on your spec, and Blizzard are even smart enough to let us customize our secondary stats. That's in the form of the cloak using new fiber sockets, which basically are just gems for your cloak that tailors are able to make. Pretty nice, but most importantly, unlike the last few cloaks, it's not a pain in the ass to get whatsoever. You unlock it during the story, you upgrade it with a weekly, and progress is properly account-wide. I'll totally admit this could just be Stockholm Syndrome, but something about getting an upgradable cloak that's tied to the world and tied to a raid with some neat mechanics, yeah, just does sort of feel proper World of Warcraft at this point. And even better, it does mean that they don't have to put annoying cloak drops in the loot tables. And also, you get all the benefits of an artifact item, something you can pump up with a bunch of power, have some cool effects with, but without really any of the usual downsides. So, I'd say it's a big up. And speaking of things that you can wear, well, this patch is an absolute dream come true for people who like certain types of aesthetics. So, if you like ethereals, as I do, or edgy void gear, as I do, then basically good news. This patch is rammed with that stuff. Everything's just got that familiar kind of sharp aesthetic. The sets and the weapons kind of look nothing like what we've had before. Like, they're really cool. As an example, warlocks, you can get a void portal for your face. Basically, the lay of the land here is that the world sets look absolutely amazing. The tier sets, I'd say, are generally less impressive than them, which means you'll probably see armies of ethereal looking players everywhere you go, which I suppose is kind of fitting once you get through the story. Anyway, of everything, it's actually the weapons that stand out the most here, just because everything's got that crackle of void lightning to it, or just a sharp colored edge, super bright, super striking, and pretty much the perfect follow-up to what, say, the Burning Crusade's atrocious clown colors were probably aiming for back in the day. So, at least in that regard, I love what we'll be able to get here. So, staying free from spoilers, that's the lion's share of what's going on in this patch. So by now, you'll kind of know if you're excited by this or not. I'd say subjectively, from our time in PTR, this does look like a really good patch that's full of improvements. It's not massively exciting or massively different, but I think that that's the sort of energy you're looking for from an expansion. For a patch, you basically just wanted to be a really good World of Warcraft patch. And broadly, I think they have actually achieved that. Still, if you want something drastically new as a solo player, this may not impress you, but if you've liked the War Within so far, but, maybe didn't like the story or the theme of the Undermine patch, and you just want to get back to stuff that feels like it's proper A-plot with real big stakes, then yeah, this is actually a really good slice of that. Of course, if you're more of a Raider or a Mythic Plus player, I'd say this patch is shaping up in a way that could be excellent. Obviously, they could totally cock it up by launch, but what we can see thus far is that Blizzard's focus here is on massive seasonal upgrades. There are so many of them, and we covered them in this video earlier in the week, so go check that out next.